Welcome to the Craft of Coaching podcast, where we dive into what it truly takes to become a skilled, confident life coach. I'm your host, Kate, head of the CLCC, or Certified Life Coach Collective, an ICF-Accredited Level 1 coach training program. We combine courage, coaching, and community to offer you more than just a training program, but a life-changing experience where you use your own personal transformation as the learning ground for supporting your clients. On this podcast, we explore how you can use coaching skills to support your clients or expand your own growth, all grounded in evidence-based coaching practices. Learn more about our program and get free resources for becoming a life coach at teamclcc.com. And now, here's today's episode. Super quick note before I dive into today's episode on using instructional design methodologies to create amazing courses. I have a new course that will be coming out myself. Listen to the end of today's episode to learn how you can be a beta tester for this course. I will only have beta testing options open for a limited time. So if you are listening to this, years from now, that will not still be an option. But just saying, at the end of today's episode, there's some information on how you could be a beta tester for an upcoming course that I'm putting out. Hey, everybody, it's Kate, and today we are diving into instructional design for coaches. And in case that title, instructional design, has you feeling like, well, wait, it's a little fancy or da-da-da, really what we're talking about is how do you create effective group coaching programs or courses? And how can you really bring some of the aspects of instructional design, which is a thing in the world, if you didn't know, research-backed, how do we develop things that are actually effective for learners is really the core of instructional design methodologies. This is an episode that's really about how to help you create those effective group coaching programs or online courses or whatever it is that you happen to be creating. And so I'm going to be giving you some very specific advice on how you can improve existing programs using these principles or things to keep in mind if you're creating something from the ground up. I know a lot of people want to create group coaching programs, courses, things like that. Love it. I love creating those things. I am totally a teacher at heart. And so we're going to get into that today. Now, I'm going to start with what typically happens most of the time. Most of the time, when coaches create courses or group programs, the mentality is, I know some tools that were really helpful for me, and I want to share those with people at scale. So here's what I'm going to do. I will write or make videos of these lessons and put them into some kind of portal, or I'll grab a retreat space of some kind, or we're going to have some weekly virtual calls, and I'll share what it is that I know, and this will be helpful for the people who want to learn something. And maybe that sounds familiar to you, and I definitely know that there have been times early in my career that sounded familiar to me to do. It, however, is not the most effective approach. So I'm going to be talking about how that approach, it is a lot of work and you don't realize the places where you are off course until it's too late and you've already put the work in. Compared to the results you could get from courses and group coaching programs, if you made sure that, hey, when I'm creating a group program or a course, I'm intentionally making sure that I do some checks and balances and apply some instructional design approaches. So I'm going to go over how to bring instructional design methodology to the development of your group coaching program or course. In case you're wondering what my background with this is, I have been a corporate trainer in my history. I've, worked in corporate, taught in organizations, taught actually at the college level. I have an instructional design certificate from Duke University. So I actually kind of nerd out on this stuff. It just isn't the hallmark of what I do for CLCC or as a coach. And so it's something I don't talk about as much, but love a good instructional design, research article or, book or, things of that nature. I'm all about it. So let's get into it. The big thing that I want to talk about today is how you can avoid the information dump or the info dump. Most of the coursework that is out there, this is coursework that's online, These are group programs. These are in-person retreats with learning components. Most of what's out there, unfortunately, is an info dump. An info dump is anytime someone with knowledge takes that approach that I mentioned earlier, I know some tools that were helpful to me and I'm going to share them with people. Now, I really want to make sure I say this because I know how hard it is to put yourself out there. It's tough. So I don't want anyone to think, oh my God, this is so cringy. I've been doing an info dump. Pause. You don't know what you don't know until you realize what you don't know. And this is an opportunity to improve the overall quality and efficacy of what you're bringing to your people. So if you recognize that what you have been doing in the past has been an info dump, the good news is that you probably are not going to have to completely reinvent the wheel. You're just going to need to shift your approach. Okay? So this is not a critique of anyone. I'm not saying anyone's bad. I don't want anyone to walk away from this feeling like ashamed. We just want to do what's most effective for our clients and the participants in our programs. So info dump. That is when you are simply giving knowledge. I know some tools. I have some knowledge. I'm going to share the knowledge. Giving information is not the same as teaching information. And if you are running a course, a program, if you are doing any kind of a retreat that has a learning component, obviously a retreat where like you just are going to sip a good glass of wine and like watch the sun go down. It's not really a learning thing necessarily. But anytime you're doing anything with a learning component, you want to make sure that you are not just giving information. You want to make sure you're teaching information. And if you don't believe me, or you're kind of like, I got it, Kate, but exactly what is the difference? Let me ask you this. Let's say that I am a swim instructor. Let's say that I'm not just any swim instructor. Let's say I'm your kid's swim instructor, a child who does not know how to swim. And on day one of your child coming in for their first ever swim lesson, imagine that I show your child a video of myself swimming and I say, see what I know how to do? See all the success I've had at swimming? You just need to know what I know how to do. And then I'm going to tell you what I know how to do. Would you feel comfortable with your child going into the water after that kind of a quote unquote swim lesson? I really hope not. I'm a mom. I would not feel comfortable with that. And I see this attitude, and again, it's unintentional, but it's really prevalent, I would say, especially in influencer courses, marketing courses. Someone says, see, I know how to make six figures. See all the success I've had. Now you just need to know what I know. But knowing information isn't the same thing as applying information. And I can parallel this with coaching. Some of the people who listen to this podcast are considering becoming coaches. Others already are coaches. And I would ask anyone, does watching a few coaching sessions done by someone else qualify you to coach in a masterful way yourself? No. Right? Would watching me give a PowerPoint presentation on all that I know about coaching be enough for you to coach in a masterful way yourself? No, of course not. That's why with Team CLCC, our entire approach is experiential learning, applied practice. You will coach for the first time, starting with our in-person retreat weekend. Get prepared to amaze yourself. So many people get nervous when we do that exercise, and then they come out of it and they're like, oh my God, I did it. And it's a huge confidence boost. And this is tied in with the principles of instructional design, where we took time to do an analysis of what our audience needs to not just know, but also be able to do, and developed and designed coursework that meets those needs and found ways to bring applied practice to the learning experience. So most of the coursework that's out there that is simply information giving does not have those components of instructional design. So I actually want to give you a little bit of applied practice and just kind of pause and consider now, what are some of the problems with what I just described with that example of giving your child a swim lesson where I just show them myself swimming, talk about swimming, and then go, you go do it now? What would be a problem with teaching a child to swim in that way? And consider that for yourself. And you can pause this if you like, assuming you're not driving, assuming you're, in a space. Like, really try to actively work your way through, like, what would not work about that? I mean, aside from the fact that the kid probably would not know how to swim and it would not be safe. But what would be a problem in terms of that kid not knowing how to swim and not learning how to swim yet? So I'm going to assume that you've taken some time to consider that question. I'm going to dive into what I've identified as problematic about that. So first, the learning has to be attuned to the learner and the learner's schema or point of view. A kid who is coming in for their first swim lesson ever, just showing them somebody swimming and talking about swimming, that is probably not enough for especially like a 3, 4, 5-year-old still working on motor control, right? So some questions you might ask yourself when you're thinking about your own programs, courses, etc. What is my learner's background? What is their history? What do they already know how to do? What do they not know how to do yet? What questions do they have? What are their goals? What solutions have they already tried that were ineffective or incomplete? What were the road bumps? Where were they getting stuck? When they were making success, if they did make any success, what was behind that success? So if you consider all of these questions as part of analyzing your audience needs, where they're currently at, where they're trying to get to go, this will help you to avoid the information dump. You don't want to just create a course on how to heal your wounded inner child without knowing what it is that most of the people out there doing inner child work have already tried, or what might be too intense for them, or what their goals are in doing inner child work. So do that analysis of your learner's needs. And then based on the things that are coming up in that analysis, make sure that the content in your program, in your course, in your retreat, whatever you're designing, make sure that that is actually addressed, right? Second, going back to this question of what are some of the problems with this example I gave of giving your child a quote unquote swim lesson where I just show them some stuff or talk to them about some stuff. Second problem, the example I gave with the kid in the pool does not break down the concept of swimming into component parts. And anyone who has ever learned how to swim, let me tell you, the component parts thing will really resonate. If you learned how to swim as a kid, you remember what that process was like, good on you. I'm just going to dive into a little personal anecdote here. My parents put me in swim lessons as a kid, and I didn't really know what to do. And then in my 30s, I decide I want to do a half Ironman triathlon, which involves swimming. And so I signed up for swimming lessons at my gym. And let me tell you, I had a guy who was like 20. He looked like he was just out of high school and was like on the high school swim team. He was the person assigned to me as the instructor. It's humbling, let me tell you right now, to have like a post-baby body, not very athletic, in the pool, 15 years older than this guy who's like looking at me like, what am I doing teaching this woman how to swim? It was humbling, let me tell you, but I know how to swim now. And I did my 1.2 miles for the half Ironman. All right, I'm digressing. Sorry. I like to put a bit of the personal into the work here. But nonetheless, if you remember anything about learning to swim, or you're trying to teach your kids to swim, etc., giving someone too much at once is really overwhelming. We need to break things down into component parts. If you threw your kid into a pool, and while they're trying to stay afloat, first you're telling them, hey, kick harder. And then you're telling, well, you got to breathe. And then you're telling, no, you need to move your arms faster. It's too much information to process at once. You got to break skills down into component parts. And we do this, again, with Team CLCC. We use the ICF core competencies as our primary model for the curricula. We run what we call skill drills on the different competencies, having, for instance, one session entirely devoted to active listening skills. So I gave an example earlier of, what if you're creating a course on, say, working with your inner child? Don't shove your audience straight into a really intense exercise, even if it was one that you did once that was profoundly healing for you, without knowing their current tolerance. If you're creating a course on marketing, don't tell your learners, all right, here it is, go write a sales page, when they don't yet know what their core offering is or how to talk about the problems that they're going to help people with. So as you're designing and developing your course, make sure that you break things into component parts. And that means define terms, give examples with definitions, explain any logical sequences, think through where it is that there are common speed bumps and develop some kind of best practices or protocols to help people with those speed bumps because they're going to run into them. And I'm going to talk more about this later, but if you have a beta group that can test your content before it's officially live, that's absolutely a best approach. Beta groups are really helpful. All right, third thing that is a problem with the example I gave earlier of just showing a kid a video on swimming and talking about swimming and then going, oh yeah, now you do it. Whoever is taking your course is going to need applied practice. And as coaches, we are intimately familiar with the phenomenon of people knowing better yet not doing better. Our clients are smart. I receive coaching all the time, and I don't think I'm the smartest person in the world, but I don't think I'm the dumbest either. And I 100% come to my coach with things where I know better and haven't yet figured out how to do better. No one coming to coaching is dumb and just doesn't realize what they need to do. They know they need exercise, or they know they need positive communication strategies, or they know they need to make choices that result in greater work-life balance. Applied practice means finding those ways to give your learners real practice with a concept. If they need exercise, applied practice might look like reframing exercise as a positive thing instead of a drag. Notice that the reframe is the part that I said was applied practice, because maybe what you're going to identify through analysis is the stuff that gets in the way of your people actually taking action around the things they need to be doing in their lives. If a client needs to use positive communication strategies, they probably know what they should say, and what gets in the way of using those tools is feeling reactive in the moment. So this is another great example of why applied practice is important, as well as that analysis of the audience and what they actually need. Your clients, your people, might not need to know information so much as they need to know how to use the information or how to overcome a hurdle that is preventing them from using the information. When instructional designers, like as a profession, are designing a course, they'll go through different stages of designing, getting feedback, analysis, reanalysis, implementing, iterating, things of that nature. When they implement a course, either because it's self-paced and is posted to a learning portal or because it's facilitated directly, often they're getting some kind of feedback from their learners. And this can be as simple as a 1 to 5 Likert scale, a mid-course survey, a facilitator saying, raise your hands if. There are lots of different ways to get feedback. It doesn't have to be a formal survey for it to be feedback. So, how are you designing your group coaching program or your online course to include those things? With CLCC, we have a weekly tracker that all participants fill out. It's pretty simple, 1 to 10 rating in a couple of different areas. Takes maybe 2 minutes. And it's our way of knowing how people are doing from week to week. As director of the program, especially since our program spans several months, I don't want to find out that someone's been struggling during an after-course survey when it's all done. I want to know that right away so that someone on our team can assist. So same thing for you. How are you going to build in that ability to collect feedback on how people are doing as they go which is going to give you that information on how to better assist them, and it's going to improve future iterations of the course. Now, so far I've covered why you need to bring in instructional design principles to your group programs or courses. It's because you want to avoid an information dump and truly teach people how to not just know things, but apply what they know. I've also gone over some specific things drawing from instructional design that you want to have present in your programs and courses. And that's analysis of your audience and what they actually need so that you can attune your course or your program to those needs, breaking concepts down into component parts, giving opportunities for applied practice, and making sure you get some feedback as you go that can tell you if you're going in the right direction. I'm going to end today by talking about the importance of a beta group. Yes, a beta group will take more time, possibly more expense, for you to first launch your program or your course to a beta group. But I genuinely believe that it will help you to create something far more substantial. You are going to be much more likely to create a course that people are going to go, this met all of my needs. I'm raving about it to other people. You really and truly gave me something, in fact, unexpected. And by the way, you really know you're on the right track if somebody says, it was like you were reading my mind as we were going through. And it, like, every time I had the next question, there it was in the next lesson, things like that. And by the way, you can charge for a beta group if you like. When I run a beta group, I always offer, discount pricing as a for instance. It's kind of a win-win. I get the feedback and the insight. They get like a steep discount on whatever I'm doing. So beta groups provide valuable feedback. And every time you run any kind of group, I always suggest asking them for ideas about what else they might want to help with to see if that spurs ideas for additional needs that you can meet. For instance, one of the things I've learned from running Team CLCC all these years is that new coaches need not just the coaching skill set and marketing knowledge, but they also need business operations skills. So those are skills in knowing what to focus on each day, how to organize your time, things like that. And this is what I've learned purely from listening to the needs of our learners in Team CLCC, and now it's a value add that we can bring to our Team CLCC participants. In fact, it is something that we will be adding into our course this year as a free add-on for everybody who is a CLCC participant. And by the way, for that reason, I've actually been working on this new course that will debut soon. It's going to be free for CLCC participants, but other people will be able to access it as well, although it will be at cost. When it's ready, you will see it on the Team CLCC website. It's all about business operations so that you can better manage your time, feel less overwhelmed when you're running a business, balance the needs of content creation, networking, all the things you got to do to run a business with your actual coaching sessions, things like that. And if you are interested, by the way, in being a beta tester for the program, just reach out to support@yourcourageouslife.com with the subject line beta tester, and just add in a quick message that you're interested in being a beta tester for my new business operations course when it's ready. And we'll be happy to give you pretty steep discount if you get in as a beta tester, and early access when that business operations program is ready. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Before you go, would you take just one moment to give a rating in whatever podcast app you're listening in right now? It's a tiny action that helps to get this podcast out to more people. And I've got more for you. You can get access to free resources, audios, worksheets, and more for practicing courage in your everyday life. Head over to yourcourageouslife.com and become a subscriber, and you'll get access to an entire library of free courageous resources. And if you've ever thought about becoming a coach, or if you want to bring deeper presence and purpose to your work life so that corporate job doesn't feel quite so soul-sucking, check out the CLCC Coach Training Program at teamclcc.com. Thank you again for listening, and I hope that whatever today brings, you meet it with courage.